Artesia. Michael Rebman from the Artesia Historical Museum and Art Center joins us. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning.
Hopefully the museum received some beneficial rains from all the showers we've had the last couple of days.
Beneficial, yes, but it also gave me an opportunity to walk around in the rain and look to see where the water's accumulating. We definitely have some landscaping projects in the future to take care of that.
That's true. There's landscaping projects, and there's roofs that will probably be needing repair, and all kinds of other things that happen when we do get some rain. So, well, let's kind of dig into our topic for today. I asked Michael what he wanted to talk about today, and you said names, and I said people, places, things, and you said could be all of it. So, where would you like to start out?
Well, let's start with Artesia itself, its name.
Okay.
Because everything that has a name, the name comes from somewhere. Of course, Artesia, when you look through all of Eddy County, you'll see that towns, of course, have names. Artesia's name comes from the Artesian Wells. But when you drive up and down 285, you'll see other places like Dayton. Dayton's name came from J.C. Day, a person who tried to get Dayton started, and it was his lands that the city was built on, or rather town Dayton.
Okay.
If you keep on going south, you'll find Seven Rivers. There used to be a town there, and it received its name from the fact that there were seven rivers that merged together there.
It's hard to imagine that time as dry and as desert-like as it is around here, but there were, at one time, I guess, there were seven rivers.
And some of that, of course, came about from the wells that were being drilled down that tapped into the groundwater that reduced the springs that fed the various rivers.
Okay.
So that's partly why the groundwater partly why it's so dry, but of course it's also dry because it's New Mexico and we always have droughts.
That's right.
But when you keep on going south on 285, you'll find Carlsbad. Of course, Carlsbad, that is not its original name. It was originally the town of Eddy.
Mm-hmm.
The same name as the county. It was named after Eddy, the person who came up with the entire idea of farming in the area, because he wanted to shift everything from ranching to farming using the Pecos River to irrigate everything.
Irrigate, yeah.
So he came up with he worked with James Hagerman to develop all the various Pecos irrigation companies, and one of those had a subsidiary, the Eddy Townsite Company, named after himself, of course.
Right.
And at the same time, since he was such an influential lobbyist for bringing people to the area, they named the county after him when they formed the county in 1889. So you have Eddy County, the town of Eddy, which was its county seat, which they stole from Seven Rivers. And after Charles Eddy left Eddy County to focus on building railroads on the other side of the mountains, when he was busy trying to build Alamogordo, that's when they decided to change it to a different name, in part because they thought that naming it Carlsbad after the town in Carlsbad would convince people that it's a good place to go to relax, because Carlsbad in Austria was a place where they had hot springs, and hence the name Carlsbad. Bad is the German word for baths, for hot springs. And partly because they wanted to get rid of the Eddy name, because Eddy abandoned Eddy County.
Right, so, went to other interests. A lot of places pop up or were given names or had names associated because of railroad activity. Was there a lot of that in Eddy County and in this area back in the day?
No, the places here were mostly named in Eddy County were mostly named after people or named after local features, or they're named after other places. They were not necessarily named after railroads, especially since the railroad was didn't come about until the early 1890s, after people had already started settling in the area. And so when you drive through Artesia, you won't find a lot of railroad-focused names for streets, for example. But instead, you'll find, of course, main streets. You'll find main streets everywhere. You find the same sort of names here that you'd find in Roswell and in other towns. For example, Quay.
Okay.
Named after Matthew Quay, a politician, a senator who was very, very vocal about supporting statehood for territories out west.
Okay.
He wanted to be the sort of East Coast advocate for the West. And so, of course, they named Quay County after him, but they also named the road after him, or the avenue. The avenue that you're on.
That I'm on, yeah. And see, I didn't know it was named after an individual. I just thought it was a New Mexico pronunciation of a Scottish or Irish word.
Oh, no. That's the same for my street, Richardson Avenue. That was named after a different person, a more local person, Granville A. Richardson. He was a judge, an early settler of the Pecos River area. He lived in Roswell, but people tend to copy street names everywhere, so there's a Richardson here. Same for Ritchie Avenue to the north of town. That's named after an early settler, and one of the co-owners of the town sites company that they based the eastern side of the town on. But you also find, and of course, some of the streets that were built later were named after later people, like J.J. Clark was named after a mayor. I'm not too sure about Mahoney, but there was a mayor named Mahoney in the 40s. But then you find things like Chisholm. That's obvious. Sally Chisholm.
Right.
Sally Chisholm Stegman.
Right.
In fact, the town was originally, at one point, the town was going to be named after her, Stegman, at least the railroad depot and the post office. And that's another interesting thing to note, how, at least not here, but, well, temporarily here, the post office had a lot of influence on the names of towns.
Okay.
Especially the really small towns where it's like 50 to 100 people living there. Whatever the post office decides to call the post office is what the town's name is going to be until they file the paperwork for the official state paperwork for becoming incorporated into a town.
So the post office would pick a name.
Yes, and especially if the name that the local people called the town was shared somewhere else, which is a major issue with New Mexico. There are so many different San Antonios in the state. It's unbelievable. And so the town here gained the name of Stegman because the post office decided to name it after the postmaster at the time, Sally Chisholm Stegman.
Okay.
I'm sure she had some say in the matter as well. But it was later named Artesia.
Artesia, yeah, because of the wells. That's kind of fascinating. Now you said Mahoney. I've lived here a long time. I've always heard it pronounced Mahone, but maybe that's a more proper way to say it. But I bet just about.
Oh no! Don't trust me on pronunciation. I can barely pronounce English.
But I guess there's a history pretty much behind pretty much every name that would be in town.
There is. It's just hard to find it.
Yeah, like Texas. I mean, did they call it Texas in honor of the state of Texas, or did they call it Texas because it led to Texas, or Why did they pick Texas for that street?
Well, no one wrote that down. No one.
Yeah, or Roselawn, for example. Is there a story behind Roselawn?
There's a story. Whether or not it's the official story, there's really no way of knowing. But the story that they wrote back in the early 1900s, originally it was because of the way the two different town site companies merged together, one oriented on the railroad, the other oriented on a simple east-west way.
Mm-hmm.
There were originally two 3rd Streets, East 3rd Street and West 3rd Street. And the story that they had in the early 1900s was they decided to rename West 3rd Street to Roselawn because there were rose bushes.
Okay. The east and west, but Roselawn goes north and south, so that
Yes.
So.
But if you count the streets, you'll see that there's 1st, there's 2nd, there's 3rd, there's Roselawn, then there's 4th.
Right, exactly.
And if you look at it through aerial photographs, you'll see that 1st, 2nd, 3rd are lined up with the railroad, and the railroad is not strictly north-south.
That's correct.
At least in this part of town.
That's right. That's exactly right. And then 3rd is kind of chopped up with the bank and the library, but the one of the themes in the library of the entryway or the lobby way is that's a continuation of that street, which is kind of an interesting story in and of itself when the library was designed. So you can look back at that. Are there other names of streets or places in and around Artesia that strike that you find interesting?
Well, it's interesting as you get further away from Main Street, the names start taking on more modern connotations. You start seeing more Spanish language words as well being used in names. The further you get from Main Street, which shows how the town developed, which is quite interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, the state is quite interesting in the variety of names you find. And in fact, the name itself has an interesting story.
New Mexico? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was part of a marketing trick back in the 1500s. So
you have to go that far back, huh?
Well, it's a really old state. Of course, Mexico, when people think of Mexico, they think of this land of opportunities, the land of wealth. And if you're a Spanish settler wanting to leave Spain, come over to the New World, you want to go to Mexico because there's so many opportunities to gain wealth. And so when they were looking at territory beyond what had been colonized, they decided to call it New Mexico, Nuevo Mexico, because it was the newest, the latest Mexico.
Right.
Because they wanted to convince people to join the expeditions to go there because they thought that they could find wealth. They could find gold. At least that was the thought.
Sure.
And that's what Coronado had convinced everybody that they could find, that sort of wealth in New Mexico, in the lands beyond Mexico, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how it got its name.
And the New Mexico Territory, correct me if I'm wrong, the New Mexico Territory originally took up a lot more territory than what eventually became the state.
Yes, as well, originally everything beyond the Rio Grande was, New Mexico. But as they started, in fact, going all the way to the ocean, but as Spain started bringing more people into what is now the United States, they divided up the land into California, New Mexico, and Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And New Mexico was originally running along the modern state line, go up about 10 or so miles, and go all the way to California.
Yep.
So the original New Mexico colony consisted of New Mexico, Arizona, a lot of Texas, the entire the entire Big Bend area, and a little bit of Nevada, and southern Utah, southern Colorado, a little bit of California. It was a very large territory.
Sure, yeah. And fortunately or unfortunately, or however you look at it, the name has been retained, and at least in the form of the boundaries of the state that we know as New Mexico now. And
But it was pretty close, though. As I mentioned last week, there was the option to form a state unified with Arizona, and it would be called the state of Arizona.
right.
That was luckily voted down.
That's right. That's right. Other names, we've got a couple of minutes left here. Chavis was named after an individual, I believe.
Yes, Jose Francisco Chavez. He was he lived, I don't think he ever lived down here. He was a important politician and militia officer during the, mostly during the Mexican era and the early territorial era. He lived, I believe, over in the Albuquerque area. But he was a territorial politician. He owned a lot of lands. He was involved whenever the United States would go to war with any of the indigenous peoples. He was always there forming a company of local militia to serve with the U.S. Army.
Okay.
And during the Civil War, he was equally active.
Okay.
And so they formed a new county, and they named it after him in his honor to reflect how important he was in the early territorial era.
Sure.
Which is ironic, considering that Roswell was settled mostly by Texans, and they fought for the wrong side during the Civil War against him.
Against him, yeah. And then one more, let me throw at you, Hope, which is just west of Artesia.
Hope. Oh, goodness,
Is there a big story on Hope, or?
There is, if I can remember it.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay.
'Cause I know Hope had it's not its original name. It had different names. Oh.
But we know it is Hope now, but because I've always been intrigued by Hope and Loco Hills. Those are a couple of interesting names of areas around us. So anyway, that's okay, Michael. We've got about 1 minute left. Anything as far as exhibits, displays, anything coming up that you're working on you want to share with us today at the museum?
Well, we are working on the upcoming Honoring Artesia's Veterans exhibit that will open it'll open on, I'm trying to remember, Hope. It'll open on November 11th, and it'll be open until the end of December, and that will be in the Art Center.
Okay.
That's something we're still working on.
Sure, and there's usually a celebration, veterans celebration downtown Artesia, and then after that concludes, people can go by the museum and check that out. And the museum is open Tuesday through Saturday?
Tuesday through Saturday, 10 to 1, 2 to 4, and Hope was originally named Badger in Badgerville.
Okay, Badgerville.
Yeah, because they didn't, when they first settled there, they didn't